Show me what that thing between your legs does, alien bunny girl, Michael Clark shouted, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. The words echoed through the sterile white observation chamber, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding within. Moments earlier, Michael had been strapped to an examination table, subjected to the probing curiosity of Odin, a female Sci-Fi scientist. The rabbit-like alien's tall, slender frame loomed over him, her long ears twitching with excitement as she explored the unfamiliar terrain of human anatomy. It had been 3 months since the catastrophic first contact that brought humanity to its knees. The technologically superior Sci-Fi had swiftly conquered Earth, rounding up humans for study and experimentation. Michael, a 28-year-old male captured during the invasion, now found himself in a sprawling research facility on the Sci-Fi home planet. The observation chamber, a large transparent cube, sat at the heart of the complex. Surrounding it were high-tech laboratories filled with blinking monitors and strange equipment. The air hummed with the sound of machinery and the occasional chatter of Sci-Fi scientists. Odin's initial clinical detachment had given way to unbridled fascination as she discovered the extent of the anatomical differences between humans and Sci-Fi. Her fur-covered hands moved with increasing urgency, prodding and examining Michael's reproductive organs. "Fascinating," she muttered, her voice a mix of clicks and chirps. "The human male genitalia are external, unlike our internal structures. This requires further investigation." As Odin's examination became more invasive, Michael's discomfort turned to panic. He struggled against his restraints, the metal cuffs digging into his wrists and ankles. "Stop!" he yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. Odin, consumed by her scientific curiosity, ignored his protests. She reached for a nearby instrument, its purpose unknown but undoubtedly unpleasant. In that moment, fueled by fear and adrenaline, Michael summoned a burst of strength. He wrenched his right arm free, the restraint snapping with a metallic ping. Before Odin could react, he grabbed her wrist, twisting it and forcing her to drop the instrument. The sudden movement triggered an alarm. Red lights flashed and a shrill siren pierced the air. Odin stumbled backward, her eyes wide with shock. Michael quickly freed his other limbs and leapt from the table. He advanced on Odin, his earlier embarrassment replaced by determination. The Sci-Fi scientist backed away, her ears flattened against her head in fear. "Not so confident now, are you?" Michael growled, backing Odin into a corner. He could hear the approaching footsteps of Sci-Fi security forces echoing through the corridors. With a swift motion, Michael incapacitated Odin and made a dash for the chamber's exit. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a maze of white corridors. He sprinted through the facility, his bare feet slapping against the cold floor. As he ran, Michael's mind raced. He needed to find a way to contact Earth, to warn them about whatever sinister plans the Sci-Fi had in store. The fate of humanity might depend on what he'd learned in that observation chamber. Rounding a corner, Michael spotted a communication terminal. Its alien interface glowed with an otherworldly light, promising a chance at salvation. He approached it cautiously, aware that every second brought the Sci-Fi security forces closer. As his fingers hovered over the unfamiliar controls, Michael steeled himself for what lay ahead. The true nature of the Sci-Fi's intentions was still a mystery, but one thing was clear. The future of humanity hung in the balance, and he was now at the center of it all. Michael's fingers hovered over the alien controls, his heart pounding in his chest. Just as he was about to attempt to decipher the complex interface, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. The Sci-Fi security forces had caught up to him. Adrenaline surged through his body as he frantically searched for an escape route. The communication terminal glowed tauntingly, its promise of salvation now out of reach. Michael's mind raced, evaluating his options in split seconds. As the first Sci-Fi guard rounded the corner, Michael made a split-second decision. He raised his hands, feigning surrender. The guards approached cautiously, their fur-covered hands gripping strange rod-like weapons. "Don't move, human," the lead guard commanded, his voice a series of clicks and chirps that Michael's translator interpreted. Michael stood perfectly still, his muscles coiled like springs. As the nearest guard reached for him, Michael struck. He launched his head forward, connecting with the guard's face in a vicious headbutt. The Sci-Fi, unprepared for such an attack, stumbled backward with a yelp of pain and surprise. Capitalizing on the confusion, Michael lunged for the fallen guard's weapon. His fingers closed around the unfamiliar device just as another guard fired. A beam of energy sizzled past his ear, leaving a scorch mark on the wall behind him. With the stolen weapon in hand, Michael dove for cover behind a nearby console. He fumbled with the alien technology, desperately searching for a trigger or firing mechanism. A lucky press activated the weapon, sending a burst of energy towards the guards. In the ensuing chaos, Michael spotted a small grate in the wall, a ventilation shaft. He fired another volley to keep the guards at bay, then scrambled towards the opening. With a grunt of effort, he pried the grate free and squeezed into the cramped duct. The cool metal pressed against his skin as he crawled through the narrow passage. The sounds of pursuit faded, replaced by the hum of machinery and distant voices. Michael paused to catch his breath, his mind whirling with questions about his next move. Suddenly, a conversation drifted through the duct, catching his attention. Two Sci-Fi voices engaged in heated discussion. "The human reproduction project must proceed on schedule," one voice insisted. "We cannot afford any delays." "But the ethical implications," the second voice began, only to be cut off. "Ethics are a luxury we can no longer afford. The future of our species depends on this research." Michael's curiosity was piqued. He inched forward, following the sound of the voices. The duct eventually opened into a large, brightly lit laboratory. Michael peered through the grate, his eyes widening at the sight before him. The lab was filled with an array of strange equipment and glowing screens. Suspended in transparent cylinders were what appeared to be human specimens in various stages of development. Michael's stomach churned at the implications. A movement caught his eye. A female Sci-Fi with striking violet eyes and silver fur stood before a large holographic display. Her long ears twitched as she manipulated the data with graceful gestures. Gathering his courage, Michael pushed open the grate and dropped into the lab. The Sci-Fi scientist whirled around, her eyes widening in shock. How did you get in here?" she demanded, reaching for an alarm button. "Wait," Michael held up his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want answers." The Sci-Fi hesitated, her paw hovering over the button. "You're the escaped human specimen," she said, her voice a mix of fear and fascination. "I am Dr. Lyra, lead scientist on the Human Reproduction Project." "Michael," he replied, keeping his voice calm, "what exactly is this project? Why are you so interested in human reproduction?" Dr. Lyra's scientific curiosity seemed to overcome her initial fear. "Your species' reproductive methods are unique," she explained, her ears twitching with excitement. "Internal fertilization, live birth, these concepts are entirely foreign to us." As they talked, Michael learned of the genetic crisis facing the Sci-Fi. Their population was in decline, a mysterious fertility issue threatening their very existence. The Sci-Fi believed that understanding human reproduction might hold the key to their survival. Just as Dr. Lyra was explaining the intricacies of Sci-Fi reproduction, alarms blared throughout the facility. The lab doors burst open, revealing a group of armed Sci-Fi led by a battle-scarred male with fierce eyes. "Dr. Lyra," the leader barked, "step away from the human. You are accused of species betrayal." In the chaos that followed, Michael's military training kicked in. He grabbed a nearby data pad, noting the Human Reproduction Project label, and bolted for the door. Laser fire erupted behind him as he sprinted down the corridor, his bare feet slapping against the cold floor. As he rounded a corner, he collided with a familiar figure, Odin, the scientist from the observation chamber. Michael tensed, ready for a fight, but Odin's next words surprised him. "This way," she hissed, gesturing towards a hidden panel. "I can help you escape." Hesitating for only a moment, Michael followed Odin into a narrow service passage. As they hurried through the bowels of the facility, Odin explained her change of heart. "What we're doing here is wrong," she said, her voice filled with regret. "I want to make amends for my part in it." Together they navigated the complex's labyrinth, disabling surveillance systems and evading patrols. Finally, they emerged into a vast hangar bay filled with sleek spacecraft. As they approached the nearest ship, a voice rang out behind them. "Stop right there!" Michael turned to see the scarred Sele commander and his security team, weapons raised. Dr. Lyra appeared, arguing passionately for Michael's cooperation over capture. In the midst of the confrontation, Michael and Odin seized their chance. They bolted for the nearest spacecraft, with Michael's heart pounding as he tried to decipher the alien controls. The ship hummed to life just as laser fire peppered its hull. Michael's hands flew over the console, muscle memory from countless flight simulators guiding his actions. The ship lifted off, and he angled it towards the rapidly closing hangar bay doors. "Hold on!" he shouted to Odin as he pushed the engines to their limit. They shot through the narrowing gap, the ship's hull screeching against metal as they barely cleared the doors. The vast expanse of alien space opened up before them as they broke through the planet's atmosphere. Michael's grip on the controls tightened as he navigated through the unfamiliar starfield, keenly aware of the challenges that lay ahead. Beside him, Odin stared wide-eyed at the data pad Michael had grabbed. "This contains all the details of the human reproduction project," she said, her voice a mix of awe and trepidation. "The implications—" Michael nodded grimly, his eyes fixed on the starry void before them. They had escaped immediate danger, but the true nature of the Sele's plans for humanity was yet to be fully revealed. As the stolen ship carried them deeper into the unknown, Michael knew that their journey, in the fight for humanity's future, had only just begun. As the stolen ship carried them deeper into the unknown, Michael knew that their journey, and the fight for humanity's future, had only just started. Suddenly, the ship's sensors blared to life, filling the cockpit with a cacophony of alarms. Michael's eyes darted to the display, his heart sinking as he saw multiple red dots closing in fast. "Sele interceptors," he growled, his hands tightening on the controls. "They're not giving up that easily." Odin's ears flattened against her head as she peered at the display. "There's an asteroid field ahead," she chirped, her voice tense. "Perhaps we can lose them there?" Michael nodded, a grim smile playing across his lips. Time to see if those flight simulators paid off. He pushed the engines to their limit, feeling the ship shudder beneath him as it accelerated towards the looming field of space debris. The first massive chunks of rock came into view, spinning lazily in the void. Michael's world narrowed to the viewport and his controls. His hands moved with practiced precision, guiding the ship through gaps barely wider than its hull. Behind them, the Sele interceptors opened fire, their energy weapons lighting up the darkness of space. "Hold on!" Michael shouted as he wrenched the ship into a tight spiral, narrowly avoiding a massive asteroid. The maneuver sent them careening towards another larger rock. At the last second, Michael pulled up, skimming the asteroid's cratered surface. Two of their pursuers weren't so lucky, their ships erupting into fireballs as they collided with the unyielding stone. As they weaved through the asteroid field, Odin busied herself with the stolen data pad. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the information. "Michael," she said, her voice filled with awe and trepidation, "this contains more than just the details of the human reproduction project. There are coordinates here for a secret Sele outpost on a nearby moon." Michael's mind raced, weighing their options. The ship shuddered as a glancing blow from a Sele weapon grazed their hull. "We can't keep this up forever," he muttered. Making a split-second decision, he asked, "How far to that moon?" Odin's fingers flew over the data pad. "Not far. We could reach it before our fuel reserves are depleted." "Then that's where we're going," Michael declared, setting a new course. As they approached the lunar surface, the remaining Sele interceptors closed in. Energy beams lanced past the ship, one scoring a direct hit on their engines. Alarms blared as systems failed, and Michael fought to keep the craft under control. "Brace for impact," he yelled as the moon's cratered landscape rushed up to meet them. The ship hit hard, skidding across the barren surface in a shower of sparks and debris. When it finally came to a stop, silence fell, broken only by the hiss of ruptured systems and the ragged breathing of the two passengers. Michael shook his head, clearing the fog of the impact. "Odin, you all right?" The Sele scientist groaned, pushing herself up from the console. "I'm functional," she replied, her fur singed in places. "But we can't stay here. Look." Through the cracked viewport, they could see Soleil ships descending towards their crash site. In the distance, a massive structure loomed, the secret outpost. "Run for it," Michael commanded, grabbing the datapad and what supplies he could. They burst from the wreckage, sprinting across the lunar landscape towards the outpost. Their progress was slowed by the low gravity, each bound sending them sailing through the thin atmosphere. As they neared the facility, Odin pointed to an airlock. "My access codes should still work," she panted. "Quickly!" They reached the airlock just as the first Soleil troops touched down near their crashed ship. Odin's claws danced over the keypad, and to their immense relief, the door slid open. They tumbled inside, the airlock cycling closed behind them. Once inside, they found themselves in a maze of pressurized tunnels, connecting massive domed structures. The utilitarian corridors were a stark contrast to the advanced technology that hummed all around them. As they cautiously made their way deeper into the facility, Michael's unease grew. "What is this place?" he whispered. Odin's ears twitched nervously. "According to the data, it's some kind of breeding facility, but why would they need—" Her words were cut short as they rounded a corner and came face to face with a sight that made Michael's blood run cold. Before them stretched a vast laboratory, filled with rows upon rows of stasis pods, and inside each pod was a human, men and women suspended in some kind of cryogenic sleep. "By the stars!" Odin breathed, her scientific detachment crumbling in the face of the ethical nightmare before them. Before Michael could respond, a familiar voice spoke from behind them. "I see you've discovered our little secret." They whirled to find Dr. Lyra standing there, her violet eyes filled with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "Welcome to the future of both our species," she said, spreading her arms to encompass the lab. Michael's fists clenched at his sides. "What have you done?" he growled, taking a menacing step towards the Soleil scientist. Dr. Lyra held her ground. "What was necessary?" she replied. "Our species is dying, Michael. We've been trying to replicate human mating methods to solve our fertility crisis, but we lack the understanding of human physiology to make it work." As Dr. Lyra launched into a detailed explanation of their experiments, Odin's scientific curiosity seemed to override her earlier shock. She began peppering Michael with questions about human mating practices, her ears twitching with poorly concealed excitement. Michael found himself in the surreal position of trying to explain the basics of human reproduction, while simultaneously grappling with the horror of what the Soleil had done. "Look," he said, exasperation clear in his voice, "now really isn't the time for a biology lesson." Before the conversation could go any further, alarms began to blare throughout the facility. Commander Zorn's voice echoed over the intercom, ordering all personnel to apprehend the intruders. In the chaos that followed, Michael made a decision. He rushed to the nearest stasis pod, searching for a way to release its occupant. "We're getting these people out of here," he declared. Dr. Lyra moved to stop him, but in the struggle, she accidentally triggered the facility's emergency protocols. The lab began to shake as systems started to fail, and a computerized voice announced the initiation of a self-destruct sequence. As the freed humans began to regain consciousness, confusion and panic spread through the laboratory. Michael took charge, his military training kicking in. "Everyone, stay calm and follow me," he shouted over the din of alarms and crumbling infrastructure. They fought their way through the collapsing facility, Michael and Odin working together to guide the disoriented human test subjects. They encountered pockets of resistance, panicked Soleil scientists and security forces, but managed to overcome them through a combination of Michael's combat skills and Odin's knowledge of Soleil physiology. As they neared the hangar bay, hope bloomed. A Soleil transport ship large enough to carry all of them stood waiting, but their path was blocked by Commander Zorn and his elite guard, their weapons trained on the escaping group. "Surrender now, human," Zorn snarled, his battle-scarred face contorted with rage. "You cannot escape." Michael stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room for any advantage. "Want to bet?" he replied, tensing for action. What followed was a fierce battle, with Michael using every hand-to-hand combat technique he knew against the physically superior Soleil. Odin fought at his side, her knowledge proving invaluable as she called out weak points and vulnerabilities. As the facility crumbled around them, Michael and Odin managed to overpower Commander Zorn. They secured the transport ship and began the frantic process of boarding the freed humans. Just as the last of the test subjects were safely aboard, Michael spotted Dr. Lyra trapped under a fallen beam. Despite the risk, he couldn't leave her to die. He rushed back, straining to lift the debris and pull her to safety. With everyone aboard, Michael took the controls of the transport ship. The hangar bay doors began to close as the self-destruct sequence entered its final stages. Michael gritted his teeth, pushing the engines to their limit. They shot out of the bay just as explosions began to consume the outpost, the shockwave buffeting their ship as they climbed into space. As they broke atmosphere, they saw the Soleil fleet in disarray, confused by the loss of their secret facility. Taking advantage of the chaos, Michael plotted a course that would take them out of Soleil-controlled space and towards Earth. But their journey was just the beginning. The ship was filled with traumatized human test subjects in need of care. The data pad they'd stolen held secrets that could change the course of human-Soleil relations forever. And the presence of Dr. Lyra, now their prisoner, added another layer of complexity to their situation. As Michael engaged the faster-than-light drive, sending them hurtling through the cosmos, Odin approached him. Her eyes shone with a mixture of scientific curiosity and something else, something Michael couldn't quite identify. "Michael," she said, her voice low and slightly hesitant, "I was wondering if you might be willing to teach me more about human mating practices, from a purely scientific perspective, of course." Michael felt heat rise to his cheeks, caught off guard by the request. As he struggled to formulate a response, the vast expanse of space stretched out before them, holding both promise and peril for the unlikely crew of the stolen Soleil ship. Transport ship. Michael cleared his throat, trying to find the right words to address Odin's request without offending her or compromising their professional relationship. "Odin, I appreciate your scientific curiosity, but human mating practices are complex. They involve more than just biology," he explained, his gaze fixed on the ship's controls. Odin's ears twitched with interest. "Fascinating. What other factors are involved?" Before Michael could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The sudden noise startled the rescued test subjects, causing a ripple of panic to spread through the crowded hold. "We've got company," Michael growled, his hands flying over the controls. "Soleil battlecruiser on our tail." He turned to address the frightened passengers. "Everyone, find a secure position and hold on tight. This could get rough." As Michael initiated evasive maneuvers, he quickly organized the more capable individuals into teams. "Jake," he called out to a muscular man with a military bearing, "take charge of keeping the others calm and secure. Dr. Grant, I need you to monitor our life support systems." The ship lurched as Michael pushed its engines to the limit, weaving through space to avoid the incoming fire from the Soleil cruiser. Each near miss sent shudders through the hull, eliciting cries of fear from the passengers. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Lyra approached Michael and Odin at the control panel. "I can help," she said, her violet eyes filled with persistence. "Let me access the data pad. There might be information we can use." Michael hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Do it. We need every advantage we can get." As Dr. Lyra worked on decoding the stolen data, Michael spotted a dense nebula on their long-range sensors. "That's our ticket out of here," he muttered, setting a course for the swirling gases. The ship plunged into the nebula, the view outside the windows transforming into a kaleidoscope of colors. The pursuing Soleil cruiser's weapons fire became less accurate, dissipating in the dense gases. Suddenly, Dr. Lyra gasped. "By the stars," she whispered, her eyes wide as she stared at the data pad. "What is it?" Michael demanded, splitting his attention between piloting and the Soleil scientist. "The Soleil High Command, they plan to use modified human DNA to create a hybrid species. They want to erase both pure humans and Soleil from existence," Dr. Lyra explained, her voice shaking. The revelation sent shockwaves through the ship. Jake, who had been helping secure the other passengers, stepped forward. "We need to strike back," he growled. "Hit them before they can carry out this plan." Dr. Grant shook her head vehemently. "Violence isn't the answer. We should use this information to negotiate, find a peaceful solution." As the debate raged, strange energy readings began to appear on the ship's sensors. Systems started to malfunction, and the ship's trajectory became erratic. "We're losing control," Michael shouted over the growing din of alarms and arguments. "Brace for impact." The ship careened towards a small, rocky planetoid hidden within the nebula. Michael fought with the controls, managing to slow their descent enough to prevent total destruction. The vessel hit the surface hard, skidding across the barren landscape before coming to a shuddering stop. As the dust settled, Michael took stock of their situation. The ship was damaged but intact, and miraculously, there were no serious injuries among the passengers. However, they were now stranded on an unknown world, cut off from both their pursuers and any potential rescuers. "Everyone okay?" Michael called out, receiving a chorus of shaken affirmatives in response. As the passengers began to recover from the crash landing, Odin suddenly doubled over in pain. "Michael," she gasped, her fur standing on end. "Something's happening to me." To everyone's shock, Odin's body began to change before their eyes. Her fur receded, her facial features shifted, and her overall form became more humanoid. The transformation left her looking like a strange hybrid of Soleil and human. Dr. Lyra rushed to Odin's side, her scientific curiosity overriding her own discomfort. "It must be the nebula's radiation," she theorized. "It's affecting her physiology on a fundamental level." Michael ordered everyone to remain in the ship while he and Jake scouted the immediate area. The planetoid's atmosphere was breathable, but strange energy signatures permeated the landscape. In the distance, they spotted what appeared to be artificial structures, the ruins of an ancient civilization. Upon returning to the ship, Michael addressed the group. "We're stranded for now, but we're not without hope. There are ruins nearby that might contain technology we can use to repair the ship or contact help. But we need to work together, humans and Soleil alike, if we're going to survive this." As the gravity of their situation sank in, the arguments from earlier faded. Humans who had been test subjects mere hours ago now found themselves working alongside their former captors to set up a base camp and assess their resources. Dr. Grant approached Michael, her eyes alight with scientific intrigue. "Those ruins could hold more than just spare parts," she said. "They might contain answers about the nebula's properties, maybe even a solution to the Soleil fertility crisis." Michael nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "Assemble a team," he ordered. "We're going to explore those ruins and see what we can find." As they prepared for the expedition, Odin stumbled over to Michael, still adjusting to her new form. "I'm coming with you," she insisted, her voice a mix of tenacity and fear. "Whatever's happening to me, the answers are out there." Michael looked at Odin, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes but also the strength of her spirit. He realized that their journey had taken an unexpected turn, leading them into unknown territory that could reshape the future of both their species. With a nod of agreement, Michael led the team out of the ship and towards the ancient ruins, each step taking them closer to answers that could change everything. The fate of two species now rested on what they would discover in the remnants of a long-lost alien civilization. As they approached the looming structures, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to stumble upon something extraordinary. The ruins stretched before them, a maze of crumbling spires and weathered stone. Michael led the way, his senses on high alert for any potential dangers. Dr. Grant followed close behind, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the alien architecture. "Look at these inscriptions," she breathed, running her fingers along a wall covered in intricate symbols. "They're unlike anything I've ever seen." Odin stumbled slightly, still adjusting to her new form. Jake reached out to steady her, his hand lingering on her arm for a moment longer than necessary. She gave him a grateful smile, and Michael noticed a flicker of something unspoken pass between them. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, the air grew thick with an electric charge. The hairs on Michael's arm stood on end, and he could taste metal on his tongue. "Everyone stay close," he warned, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to vibrate. The tremors grew stronger as they rounded a corner, revealing a vast chamber that took their breath away. At its center stood a towering obelisk, pulsing with an otherworldly energy that bathed the room in an eerie blue light. Dr. Lyra gasped, her violet eyes wide with recognition. This is a genetic manipulation device, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But it's far more advanced than anything the Selae possess. Michael approached the obelisk cautiously, studying its intricate surface. Can we use it? He asked, glancing back at Dr. Lyra. She nodded, her fingers already flying over the alien controls. I believe so. The interface is complex, but I think I can... Before she could finish her sentence, the obelisk flared to life. A surge of energy exploded outward, engulfing the team in a blinding white light. Michael felt as if his very atoms were being pulled apart and reassembled. His mind expanded, filling with an overwhelming influx of information. When the light faded, Michael blinked, disoriented. He looked down at his hands, expecting to see some physical change, but everything appeared normal. Yet he felt profoundly different. Is everyone all right? He called out, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. One by one, the team responded. They all seemed physically unchanged, but their eyes held a new depth of understanding. Dr. Lyra was the first to speak. The device? It's implanted knowledge directly into our minds, she said, her voice filled with awe. I understand now. This technology could solve the Selae fertility crisis without resorting to human Selae hybrids. As the implications of this revelation sank in, a distant rumble shook the chamber. Michael's communicator crackled to life, Jake's voice cutting through the static. Michael, we've got a situation back at the crash site. You need to get back here now. The urgency in Jake's voice spurred them into action. They raced back through the ruins, their minds still reeling from the influx of genetic knowledge. As they emerged from the ancient structures, they were met with a scene of chaos. The planetoid's surface was fracturing, steam and lava spurting from newly formed fissures. The ship, their only means of escape, sat precariously on the unstable ground. Jake ran to meet them, his face etched with concern. The planetoid's core is destabilizing, he reported. We need to get out of here before this whole rock tears itself apart. Michael's mind raced, processing the new information. Dr. Grant, work with the ship's engineer. See if you can get those engines back online. Dr. Lyra, use what we've learned to boost our life support systems. We might need the extra capacity. As the team scrambled to their tasks, Michael noticed Odin standing apart from the others, her body racked with tremors. Her transformation had accelerated, her features now almost entirely human. Jake hovered nearby, clearly torn between his duties and his desire to comfort her. Jake, focus on securing our supplies, Michael ordered. We don't know how long we'll be out there once we lift off. Jake nodded reluctantly, casting one last glance at Odin before moving to carry out his orders. Hours passed in a flurry of activity. The planetoid's tremors grew more violent, the sky darkening with ash and debris. Just as hope began to wane, Dr. Grant's voice rang out over the commotion. We've restored partial power to the engines, she shouted, her face streaked with grime and sweat. But we're missing a crucial component for escape velocity. Michael's mind flashed back to the ancient machinery in the ruins. I think I know where we can find it, he said, already moving towards the exit. I'm taking a team back to the obelisk chamber. As he assembled a small group for the retrieval mission, a particularly violent tremor shook the ship. Odin cried out in pain, her body contorting as another wave of changes swept over her. Jake was at her side in an instant, supporting her as she struggled to remain upright. Michael locked eyes with Jake, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Take care of her, Michael said softly. We'll be back as soon as we can. With one last look at the chaos around him, Michael led his team back into the crumbling ruins, knowing that the fate of everyone on board now rested on their success. The race against time had begun, with the very ground beneath their feet threatening to become their tomb. Tomb. The ground shook violently, nearly knocking Michael off his feet as he led his team back into the ancient ruins. Time was running out. As they raced through the crumbling corridors, a distant rumble caught their attention. Michael held up his hand, signaling the team to stop. Do you hear that? Dr. Grant nodded, her eyes wide. It's coming from above. They looked up to see a sleek, silver vessel descending through the planetoid's turbulent atmosphere. Its design was unlike anything they'd ever seen, clearly not of human or Selay origin. "Back to the ship now," Michael ordered, his mind racing with possibilities and potential threats. They sprinted out of the ruins, the component they needed clutched tightly in Dr. Grant's arms. As they approached their damaged vessel, Michael saw the crew gathering outside, their faces a mix of fear and curiosity as they watched the unknown ship land nearby. "Everyone inside," Michael commanded as he reached the group. "Maintain defensive positions." The crew scrambled to obey, taking up stations throughout the ship. Michael stood at the airlock, flanked by Jake and Dr. Lyra, as the alien vessel's hatch opened with a hiss of escaping air. A tall, slender figure emerged, its skin a swirling pattern of blues and greens. Two more aliens followed, each unique in appearance but sharing an air of advanced intelligence. The lead alien raised a hand in what appeared to be a gesture of peace. "I am Captain Zax of the Galactic Coalition," it said, its voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "We come in peace and request permission to board for diplomatic talks." Michael exchanged glances with Dr. Lyra and Dr. Grant, who had joined them at the airlock. After a moment of silent communication, he nodded. "Permission granted, Captain Zax. Please, enter." As the Coalition representatives boarded, Michael couldn't help but notice how Odin shrank back, her newly transformed body trembling slightly. Jake moved closer to her, offering silent support. Once inside, Captain Zax wasted no time in explaining their presence. "We have been monitoring both human and Selay civilizations for some time," he said, his multifaceted eyes scanning the assembled crew. "The conflict between your species has raised concerns within the Coalition." Dr. Lyra stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her initial caution. "You've been watching us? For how long?" "Long enough to know that your current path leads to mutual destruction," one of the other aliens replied, its voice a melodious whisper. Captain Zax nodded solemnly. "We offer our services as mediators in your conflict. The genetic knowledge you've acquired from these ruins could be the key to peaceful coexistence." Michael felt a surge of hope at these words, but it was quickly tempered by Zax's next statement. "However, there is a greater threat that both your species must face," the alien captain continued. "The Void Harvesters, beings of pure energy that consume the life force of entire planets. They are moving through the galaxy, leaving dead worlds in their wake." A collective gasp rippled through the crew. Dr. Grant's face paled as she asked, "Are they headed towards Earth?" Zax's expression grew grave. "I'm afraid so. Both Earth and the Selay homeworld lie in their path." As this dire news sank in, a cry of pain cut through the tense atmosphere. All eyes turned to see Odin collapse to the floor, her body contorting as another wave of changes swept over her. Jake was at her side in an instant, cradling her as her features shifted. To everyone's amazement, Odin's body began to revert to its original Selay form, though her eyes still held the human-like awareness she had developed. Dr. Lyra rushed to examine her, her mind already connecting the dots. "The energy from the ruins," she muttered, more to herself than the others. "It must have unlocked hidden genetic potential in Selay physiology." She looked up at Captain Zax, her eyes alight with sudden inspiration. "This could be the key. If we can harness this energy, adapt it, we might be able to create a defense against the Void Harvesters." The Coalition representatives exchanged meaningful glances. "An intriguing possibility," Zax mused. "We can offer you safe passage to a neutral space station. There, representatives from Earth and the Selay government can meet to discuss this and other matters." Michael was about to respond when a warning alarm blared through the ship. The tactical officer's voice came over the intercom, tight with tension. "Captain, long-range sensors are picking up a Selay battle fleet approaching our position. They're demanding our immediate surrender." The crew froze, looking to Michael for direction. He felt the weight of their expectations, the fate of two civilizations seemingly resting on his next decision. It was Jake who broke the tense silence, stepping forward with a determined glint in his eye. "I have an idea," he said, glancing at Odin, who was slowly regaining her composure. "It's risky, but it might be our best shot at getting out of this alive." Michael listened intently as Jake outlined his daring plan. The genetic manipulation technology they had acquired could be used to temporarily alter the appearance of some crew members to look like Soleil. This would allow them to infiltrate the approaching fleet and potentially negotiate directly with its commander. As Jake finished explaining, Michael weighed the risks and benefits. It was a dangerous gambit, but with the void harvesters looming on the horizon, they needed every advantage they could get. All right, Michael decided, his voice firm with tenacity. We'll do it. Dr. Lyra, Dr. Grant, begin the genetic alteration process on our volunteer team. I'll be joining them. He turned to Captain Zax. We accept your offer of escort to the neutral station, but first we need to deal with this Soleil fleet. As the crew sprang into action, Michael felt a mix of anticipation and dread. He stepped into the medical bay, where Dr. Lyra was preparing the genetic alteration equipment. As he lay down on the examination table, he caught sight of his reflection in a nearby monitor. Michael took a deep breath, knowing that the next time he saw his face, it wouldn't be his own. The fate of humanity, the Soleil, and perhaps the entire galaxy now hinged on the success of this desperate plan. The fate of humanity, the Soleil, and perhaps the entire galaxy now hinged on the success of this bold strategy. As Dr. Lyra activated the genetic alteration equipment, Michael felt a tingling sensation spread throughout his body. He watched in fascination as his skin rippled and changed, taking on the distinctive blue-green hue of the Soleil. His fingers elongated, and he felt his facial structure shifting. The transformation is complete, Dr. Lyra announced, her voice tight with tension. But there's a complication. The alterations are unstable. As if on cue, Michael's hand flickered, briefly reverting to its human appearance before settling back into Soleil form. He looked up to see Jake and Dr. Grant experiencing similar fluctuations. I've developed a temporary solution, Dr. Lyra said, holding up a syringe filled with a glowing blue liquid. This stabilizing compound should maintain your disguise for a limited time. She quickly injected each team member with the compound. Michael felt a wave of coolness spread through his veins, and the flickering stopped. Remember, Michael addressed his team, we have a narrow window to pull this off. Let's make it count. They boarded their shuttle, leaving behind a worried Dr. Lyra and the enigmatic coalition representatives. As they approached the Soleil flagship, Michael's heart raced. The massive ship loomed before them, dwarfing their small craft. Soleil vessel, identify yourself, a gruff voice crackled over their comm system. Jake, taking on the role of pilot, responded in perfect Soleil dialect. This is Shuttle Czar 7, requesting permission to dock. We have vital information regarding the human escapees. There was a tense pause before the voice replied, Permission granted. Proceed to docking bay 3. As they maneuvered into the cavernous docking bay, Michael's team got their first glimpse of the Soleil fleet's true scale. Rows upon rows of sleek, deadly ships filled the hangar, each dripping with advanced weaponry. By the stars, Dr. Grant whispered, her eyes wide. If they decided to attack Earth with this force... Michael silenced her with a sharp look as a group of Soleil officers approached their shuttle. He straightened his posture, adopting the haughty bearing typical of Soleil military personnel. Follow my lead, he murmured to his team before stepping out to meet their welcoming committee. I am Captain Krell, Michael announced, infusing his voice with authority. We have urgent information for Commander Zorn regarding the human vessel. The lead Soleil officer nodded curtly. Follow me. The commander is expecting you. As they were escorted through the ship's winding corridors, Michael noted the efficiency of the Soleil crew, the advanced technology integrated into every surface. It was a stark reminder of the threat they posed to humanity. They entered the command center, a vast chamber filled with holographic displays and bustling with activity. At its center stood Commander Zorn, his imposing figure radiating power and authority. Michael stepped forward, bowing his head in deference. Commander Zorn, we bring news of the human ship's whereabouts. As Michael began to relay their fabricated intelligence, he noticed Zorn's eyes narrowing, his gaze flicking between the members of the infiltration team. The commander's attention seemed particularly drawn to Odin, who stood slightly apart from the others. You say the humans are headed for the Citraxis system? Zorn interrupted, his voice laden with suspicion. Curious, our intelligence suggested otherwise. Michael felt a bead of sweat form on his brow. Our information comes from a highly reliable source, Commander. Perhaps your intelligence is outdated. Zorn's eyes hardened. Perhaps, or perhaps you are not who you claim to be. He turned to a nearby officer. Initiate a full biometric scan of our guests. Michael's mind raced. They needed more time. With a subtle hand signal to Jake, he stepped closer to a control panel. Commander, if I may demonstrate the trajectory we believe the humans are taking, Michael said, reaching for the console. In one swift motion, he jammed his fist into the panel, sending sparks flying. Alarms blared as the ship's power fluctuated, plunging the command center into momentary darkness. Now, Michael shouted. The team sprang into action. Jake and Odin moved in perfect synchronization, disarming the nearest guards, while Dr. Grant made a beeline for a data terminal. We need to get to the data core, Michael yelled over the chaos. Dr. Grant, can you access the ship's layout? On it, she replied, her fingers flying over the alien interface. As emergency lighting flickered to life, Michael found himself face-to-face with a snarling Soleil officer. He ducked under a swipe of the alien's clawed hand, retaliating with a swift uppercut. The officer stumbled back, shock registering on his face as Michael's fist momentarily reverted to its human form. This way, Dr. Grant called, gesturing toward an exit. They fought their way through the corridors, Soleil security forces hot on their heels. Michael marveled at Jake and Odin's coordinated movements, the two of them fighting as one. Odin's unique physiology allowed her to adapt on the fly, her limbs elongating or contracting to gain the upper hand in combat. They reached the data core, a pulsing chamber of light and energy. Dr. Grant immediately set to work, interfacing with the Soleil systems. Cover her, Michael ordered, taking up a defensive position at the entrance. Wave after wave of Soleil forces assaulted their position. Michael's military training kicked in, his body moving on autopilot as he fended off attackers. But with each passing minute, he could feel their genetic disguises weakening, the stabilizing compound wearing off. Got it, Dr. Grant exclaimed, holding up a data crystal. Everything we need on Soleil defenses and their plans for Earth. As they turned to leave, a commanding voice rang out. Enough of this charade. Commander Zorn stood blocking their path, flanked by elite guards. His eyes blazed with fury as he took in the partially transformed infiltrators. Abominations, he spat. You dare to desecrate our ship with your presence? Michael raised his hands, mind racing for a solution. But before he could speak, Odin stepped forward. In a display that left both humans and Soleil stunned, Odin's body began to shift rapidly. One moment she appeared fully Soleil, the next human, then a mesmerizing blend of both. Her voice, when she spoke, resonated with a harmony of both species. We are not your enemy, Commander, she said, her form continuing to fluctuate. There is a greater threat approaching, one that will destroy us all if we do not stand united. Zorn's expression wavered between disgust and fascination. This moment of hesitation was all the team needed. Jake threw a stun grenade, filling the corridor with blinding light and deafening sound. They ran, Odin's shifting form confusing and disorienting their pursuers. They reached their shuttle just as Zorn's voice boomed over the ship's comm system. All ships, target the intruders. Do not let them escape. As they detached from the Soleil flagship, Michael saw the Coalition escort moving to intercept the incoming Soleil fighters. The escort's captain's voice crackled over their comms. We'll buy you time. Get that data to safety. The future of our civilizations depends on it. Michael watched in awe and gratitude as the Coalition ship engaged the Soleil fleet, drawing their fire. Their own ship, battered but intact, slipped past the conflict and jumped to light speed. As the adrenaline of their escape faded, Michael turned to Dr. Lyra and the Coalition representatives, who were eagerly examining the stolen data. What did we get? He asked, his voice hoarse from exertion. Dr. Lyra looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. It's more than we could have hoped for. The Soleil plans, their defenses, and their own research on the Void Harvesters. She gestured to a containment unit where a strange, shimmering organism pulsed with otherworldly energy. While you were gone, we made a breakthrough. This hybrid creation, it's evolving faster than we can track. And Michael, I think it might be becoming sentient. As the implications of this discovery sank in, the ship's navigator interrupted. Captain, I've plotted a course to the nearest coalition outpost. We should be safe there to plan our next move. Michael nodded, his palms sweating from the events of the past few hours. He looked around at his crew, human, Soleil, and everything in between, and felt a glimmer of hope. They had a chance, however small, to unite their species against the coming storm. As the ship hurtled through space, Michael couldn't help but notice Jake and Odin, huddled close together in quiet conversation. Their growing bond was evident, a living symbol of the cooperation they would need to survive the trials ahead. The coalition outpost beckoned in the distance, a sanctuary where they could regroup and strategize. But as Michael watched the hybrid organism pulse and grow, he knew their greatest challenges, and perhaps their salvation, still lay ahead. Ahead, the hybrid organism pulsed with increasing intensity, its rhythmic glow casting eerie shadows across the ship's interior. Dr. Lyra's eyes widened as she observed the creature's rapid changes. It's evolving, she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and trepidation. Suddenly, Michael clutched his head, a wave of dizziness washing over him. He wasn't alone. Around the room, humans and Soleil alike stumbled, their faces contorted in confusion. What's happening? Jake asked, steadying himself against a nearby console. Dr. Lyra's gaze darted between the hybrid organism and the affected crew members. It's communicating, she realized. Telepathically. The sensation intensified, morphing from a jumble of alien thoughts into coherent ideas. Michael found himself understanding concepts that had seemed impenetrable just moments before. The lingering hostility between humans and Soleil melted away as they shared a profound moment of connection. Nexus, Odin said softly, her eyes fixed on the pulsing creature. That's its name. As the ship docked at the coalition outpost, Michael marveled at the station's immense scale. It dwarfed anything humanity or the Soleil had constructed, its sleek design hinting at technological marvels beyond their comprehension. Michael led his team through the bustling corridors of the outpost, their altered appearances drawing curious stares from the diverse array of alien species. They entered a vast chamber where coalition leaders had gathered, the air thick with tension. As discussions began, Nexus's presence became invaluable. It effortlessly translated complex ideas between species, bridging gaps in understanding that had seemed insurmountable. Through this shared consciousness, Michael glimpsed the true scope of the coalition's power and the terrifying threat posed by the Void Harvesters. Nexus's voice resonated in their minds. A biological defense system, it proposed, one that combines the strengths of all our species. The chamber erupted into heated debate. Coalition representatives argued passionately, their translator devices struggling to keep up with the rapid exchange. Absolutely not, a avian-like being squawked. The risk is too great. A crystalline entity chimed in, its voice like tinkling glass. But what choice do we have? The Void Harvesters will destroy us all if we don't act. As arguments flew back and forth, alarms blared throughout the station. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a mass of swirling energy approaching rapidly. Void Harvesters, a coalition officer announced grimly. ETA 30 minutes. The room fell silent, the reality of their situation sinking in. Michael stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. I volunteer, he said. I'll be the first to undergo the modification. His declaration seemed to break a dam. Jake stood up, followed by several coalition members. Even Commander Zorn, who had arrived with a contingent of Soleil ships, grudgingly offered volunteers from his crew. Dr. Lyra and Dr. Grant sprang into action, working alongside coalition scientists to prepare the bioengineering chambers. Michael watched as they calibrated complex machinery, Nexus guiding their efforts through its telepathic link. As Michael entered the chamber, he caught Odin's eye. She nodded encouragingly, her form already shifting in anticipation of her role in the process. The chamber sealed with a hiss, and pain unlike anything Michael had ever experienced coursed through his body. He felt his bones shifting, muscles tearing and reforming. His vision blurred, new sensory inputs overwhelming his mind. Outside, the first wave of void harvesters slammed against the station's shields. Energy arced across the barrier, the otherworldly beings probing for weaknesses. "Shields at 80% and dropping," a technician called out. Dr. Lyra worked feverishly, sweat beading on her forehead as she monitored the volunteers' vital signs. "We're losing containment on Chamber 3, she shouted. Jake, emerging from his own chamber, rushed to assist. His newly altered body moved with inhuman speed and grace. The station shuddered as another assault from the Void Harvesters weakened the shields further. Warning klaxons blared throughout the facility. "Shields at 40%, the technician updated, fear evident in their voice. Michael's chamber opened with a burst of steam. He stumbled out, his body feeling alien and powerful. His skin shimmered with an iridescent sheen, and he could sense energy fields he'd never perceived before. There was no time to acclimate. The final shield fell with a thunderous crash, and the first of the Void Harvesters breached the station. Michael led his team of modified volunteers to confront the threat. As they engaged the energy beings, their new abilities manifested in astonishing ways. Michael found he could absorb and redirect energy blasts, while Jake's enhanced agility allowed him to outmaneuver the Harvester's attacks. Odin, her body a constantly shifting marvel of adaptation, discovered she could generate a disruptive field. As she focused her power, nearby Void Harvesters began to lose cohesion, their energy dissipating. "Push them back," Michael commanded, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to resonate on multiple levels. The defenders coordinated their efforts with unprecedented efficiency, their minds linked through nexuses expanding consciousness. They drove the Void Harvesters from the breach, sealing it with a combination of technology and their new biological abilities. As the immediate threat subsided, Michael leaned against a wall, his altered body trembling from exertion. He looked at his team, human, Soleil, and Coalition alike, all irrevocably changed. Nexus's voice echoed in their minds. "This is only the beginning. The main force approaches." Michael straightened, feeling the weight of multiple species' hopes resting on his shoulders. The station hummed with activity as they prepared for the next, greater assault. In the distance, the void churned with malevolent energy, heralding the arrival of an enemy that threatened to consume them all. Michael's enhanced senses picked up a subtle shift in the station's atmosphere. The air thrummed with an energy that set his nerves on edge. He turned to Dr. Lyra, who was intently studying a holographic display of the surrounding space. "Another wave incoming," she announced, her voice tight with tension. "Much larger than before." Nexus's telepathic voice resonated in their minds, confirming the dire news. "The main force approaches. Our defenses will not withstand this assault." The gravity of the situation settled over the assembled team. They had repelled the first attack, but at great cost. The station's shields were depleted, and many of the defenders were injured or exhausted. Michael's mind raced, searching for a solution. He felt the weight of multiple species' hopes resting on his shoulders. Then an idea began to form. Bold, risky, but potentially their only chance. "We need to take the fight to them," he declared, drawing surprised looks from his team. "Find the source and shut it down." Dr. Grant frowned. "But we don't even know where they're coming from." "Actually," Dr. Lear interjected, her fingers flying over a data pad, "we might. The energy readings from the initial encounter, there's a pattern. I think we can extrapolate their point of origin." As the scientists huddled around the data, Michael noticed Odin standing apart, her form shimmering with terrifying energy. He approached her, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Odin's eyes met his, a swirl of emotions visible in their depths. I'm not sure. During the battle, I discovered I could generate a disruptive field. It seemed to weaken the Harvesters." Dr. Lyra overheard and rushed over, excitement evident in her voice. "That's it! If we could amplify that effect, create a massive energy burst. We could potentially disrupt their entire collective, Dr. Grant finished, catching on to the idea. The room buzzed with renewed energy as the team began to formulate a plan. Coalition scientists worked alongside Dr. Lyra and Dr. Grant, integrating their advanced knowledge with the data gathered from the recent battle. We've identified a weakness in their energy matrix, Dr. Lyra announced after hours of intense work. A concentrated burst of Odin's disruptive energy could theoretically collapse their entire network. But generating that much power, Dr. Grant trailed off, the implications clear. Michael stepped forward. I'll do it. My enhanced physiology might be able to handle the strain. Before anyone could object, alarms blared throughout the station. The main harvester force had entered the system. We're out of time, Michael declared. Prep me for the procedure. What followed was a flurry of activity. Coalition scientists and Dr. Lyra worked feverishly to fortify Michael's already enhanced body, pushing his genetic modifications to their limits. The process was agonizing, every cell in his body screaming as it was altered to channel unprecedented amounts of energy. Through the haze of pain, Michael felt a comforting presence. Odin stood by his side, her hand on his arm, providing an anchor amidst the torment. Her form shifted continuously, adapting to provide whatever support he needed most. Meanwhile, Jake led a team in modifying their ship. Coalition and Soleil technology merged with human ingenuity, creating a vessel capable of approaching the Harvester's home dimension. Commander Zorn, setting aside old grudges, contributed Soleil weapon systems to bolster their defenses. As the final preparations were underway, a new crisis emerged. The genetically modified volunteers began to experience painful fluctuations, their enhanced bodies destabilizing. Dr. Grant's voice was grim as he delivered the news. The modifications are breaking down. Prolonged separation from Nexus accelerates the degradation. The implications were clear. The entire team of modified individuals would need to go on the mission to maintain their stable forms. Michael surveyed his team, seeing willpower mixed with fear in their eyes. This doesn't change anything. We stick to the plan. As they boarded the modified ship, long-range sensors detected the Harvester force breaching the outer reaches of the star system. Time was running out. Michael took one last look at the Coalition outpost, knowing that the fate of countless worlds now rested on their shoulders. He gave the order to launch, and the ship surged forward, leaving the relative safety of the station behind. The journey towards the coordinates of the Void Harvester's suspected origin was fraught with danger. Pockets of distorted space-time buffeted the ship, straining both the vessel and its crew. Michael's enhanced reflexes were pushed to their limits as he made split-second decisions to keep them on course. Through it all, the team relied on their newfound connection, the shared consciousness provided by Nexus, allowing them to work in perfect unison. Human, Soleil, and Coalition members moved as one, their differences forgotten in the face of their common goal. As they approached their destination, the ship's sensors began to overload. Through their link with Nexus, they processed the overwhelming data, revealing a massive energy vortex, the source of the Void Harvesters. It's a dying star, Dr. Lyra gasped, her eyes wide with realization. They've converted it into some kind of feeding ground. Before they could fully comprehend the implications of this discovery, the ship shuddered violently. A swarm of Void Harvesters engulfed them, their energy-draining attacks threatening to leave them stranded in hostile territory. In a moment of desperate inspiration, Odin stepped forward. I have an idea, she said, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Without waiting for a response, she moved to the ship's power core and placed her hands on the pulsing energy conduits. The effect was immediate and staggering. Odin's disruptive energy coursed through the ship's hull, creating a temporary shield against the Harvester's attacks. But the strain on her body was evident, her form flickering wildly as she struggled to maintain the protection. With their defenses holding, Michael knew it was time for the final phase of their plan. He entered the specially designed chamber that would focus the collected energy through his enhanced physiology. As the process began, pain beyond anything he had ever experienced coursed through his body. Every nerve ending felt like it was on fire, every cell screaming in protest as he became a conduit for an unprecedented amount of power. Through the haze of agony, Michael forced his eyes open. He saw his team watching him with a mixture of hope and fear. Odin, still linked to the ship's core, met his gaze. In that moment, a wordless understanding passed between them. Michael's body began to glow, the energy within him scarcely controlled. He steeled himself for what was to come, knowing that this final act could end the Harvester threat once and for all, or destroy him in the process. As he prepared to unleash the disrupting blast into the heart of the Void Harvester's vortex, Michael felt the weight of multiple species' futures resting on his shoulders. The fate of countless worlds hung in the balance, as he summoned every ounce of his strength for this last daring plan. Gambit. Time seemed to slow as Michael channeled the immense energy building within him, preparing to unleash it into the heart of the Void Harvester's vortex. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing the crew off balance. Warning klaxons blared as the hull groaned under immense stress. Through the view screen, a massive shape materialized. A Void Harvester of unprecedented size, its energy field dwarfing their vessel. "Shields failing!" Jake shouted, his fingers dancing across the controls. "We can't withstand this!" The colossal entity began tearing into the ship, its tendrils of dark energy peeling away, layers of advanced alloys smoothly. The energy chamber housing Michael shuddered, hairline cracks spreading across its reinforced walls. Odin, her form still connected to the ship's power core, made a split-second decision. She disengaged from the conduits, her body flickering with residual energy as she sprinted towards Michael. The ship's systems fluctuated wildly in her absence, but she paid no heed to the chaos erupting around her. Reaching the chamber, Odin pressed her hands against the fractured barrier. Her eyes met Michael's, and in that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Without hesitation, she phased through the weakened containment field, her energy-infused body merging with Michael's in a blinding flash of light. The resulting surge of power was unlike anything they had ever experienced. Their consciousness melded, memories and sensations flowing freely between them. United, they directed this newfound energy outward, repelling the giant harvester with a shockwave that momentarily stunned the monstrous entity. Jake, witnessing this incredible fusion, knew their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. With iron will, he activated the ship's self-destruct sequence, his voice cutting through the cacophony of alarms. "All hands evacuate immediately. Get to the escape pods." As the crew scrambled to obey, Jake fought his way through the disintegrating ship towards the energy chamber. The merged forms of Michael and Odin pulsed with terrifying power, their bodies smoking from the intense energy exchange. "Michael! Odin!" Jake called out, reaching for them. The heat emanating from their fused forms seared his skin, but he pushed through the pain. With Herculean effort, he managed to separate them, their unconscious bodies slumping into his arms. The ship shuddered again, great chunks of its structure being torn away by the recovering harvester. Jake half-carried, half-dragged his companions to the last remaining escape pod. As he secured them inside, he caught a glimpse of the colossal entity through a breach in the hull. Its dark energy tendrils reached for them, threatening to snuff out their last hope of survival. Jake slammed his hand on the launch control, and the pod shot away from the dying ship. Through the small viewport, he watched as their vessel exploded in a spectacular burst of light and energy. The shockwave rippled through space, catching their pod and sending it tumbling end over end. As Jake struggled to stabilize their trajectory, he witnessed an awe-inspiring sight. The explosion, amplified by the residual energy from Michael and Odin's fusion, created a chain reaction within the harvester vortex. The ancient technology sustaining it began to fail, causing fissures of light to spread across its dark expanse. The void harvesters, including the colossal entity that had nearly spelled their doom, began to dissipate rapidly. Their energy forms unraveled like smoke in the wind, unable to maintain cohesion as their power source collapsed. As the escape pod hurtled through the chaos, Jake turned his attention to his unconscious companions. The transformation they had undergone was startling. Michael and Odin's bodies had stabilized into forms that were neither fully human nor Soleil, but a perfect blend of both species. Their skins shimmered with a faint iridescence, and Jake could sense a palpable energy field surrounding them. The pod's communication system crackled to life, breaking through the interference caused by the collapsing vortex. A familiar voice filled the small cabin. "This is Commander Zorn of the Coalition Fleet. We've detected your distress signal. Hold on, we're coming for you." Jake allowed himself a moment of relief as he responded, "This is Jake. We have multiple injured, including Michael and Odin. They need immediate medical attention." As the pod drifted through the debris field that was once the Harvester vortex, Jake monitored his friends' vital signs. Though stable, their bodies seemed to be undergoing continuous microscopic changes, adapting and evolving with each passing moment. The imposing silhouette of a Coalition medical frigate loomed into view, its tractor beam locking onto the battered escape pod. As they were drawn into the safety of the ship's hangar, Jake realized that while they had achieved victory against the Void Harvesters, the journey for Michael and Odin, and indeed for all of them, was far from finished. Medical teams swarmed the pod as soon as it touched down, whisking Michael and Odin away on hovering gurneys. Jake followed, his own injuries forgotten as he watched his friends disappear into the depths of the medical bay. The full impact of what they had accomplished began to sink in, and he leaned against a bulkhead, exhaustion finally overtaking him. A gentle hand on his shoulder startled him from his reverie. He looked up to see Dr. Lyra, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and nearly unleashed excitement. "Jake," she said softly, "you need to be examined too. But first, I need you to tell me everything that happened in those final moments. What we're seeing in Michael and Odin's genetic structure, it's unprecedented." As Jake began to recount the events, he could see the wheels turning in Dr. Lyra's mind. Whatever had happened to Michael and Odin, it was clear that it would have far-reaching implications for not just their own species, but for the entire galactic community. The Coalition ship accelerated away from the remnants of the Harvester vortex, carrying with it the seeds of a new era of interspecies, cooperation, and scientific advancement. As the stars streaked by outside, Jake couldn't help but wonder what challenges and discoveries awaited them in the wake of their hard-won victory.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.